The chambers of the Galactic Council stretched upward into darkness, a vast cathedral of metal and light that had witnessed 10,000 years of cosmic politics. Representatives from 47 species occupied their designated platforms, each hovering at precisely calculated heights, according to their civilization's age and influence. The oldest species sat highest, closest to the ancient dome where holographic stars mapped the known galaxy. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood on the lowest platform, barely 3 meters above the polished floor. She had grown used to the symbolism. Humanity had joined the galactic community only 80 years ago, a mere heartbeat in the timeline of civilizations that measured their existence in millennia. The other species treated Earth's representatives with the sort of patient condescension reserved for children who had just learned to walk. Today's session concerned trade disputes in the outer reaches, those frontier systems where younger species tried to carve out their small corners of the galaxy. Chen listened as the Vryloth Concordate's ambassador droned on about tariff regulations, his 6 eyes blinking in a pattern that other species recognized as profound boredom. The Vryloth were old, perhaps the oldest. Their civilization had been building quantum networks when humanity was still figuring out bronze. And now, the council speaker announced, his crystalline form refracting light into rainbow patterns across the chamber, we address the petition from the human delegation. Chen felt 46 sets of eyes. Sensors and awareness fields focus on her. She touched the control on her podium, and her petition materialized in the air above the chamber floor. The words glowed in translation matrices that every species could comprehend. The United Earth government formally requests consideration for a permanent seat on the Galactic Security Council, Chen said, keeping her voice steady and professional. Humanity has demonstrated peaceful cooperation, contributed to joint scientific ventures, and established successful colonies on 17 worlds. We believe we have earned the right to participate in decisions affecting galactic security. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then the laughter began. It started with the Draken hegemony's representative, a sound like grinding metal that his species used to express amusement. The Zethkar Collective's delegate, a being of pure crystalline thought, pulsed with colors that translated as mockery. Even the smaller species, those who occupied platforms only slightly higher than humanity's, joined in the merriment. Ambassador Vrylanth of the Vryloth Concordat raised one of his primary manipulators, and the laughter subsided. He gazed down at Chen with what might have been pity in those ancient eyes. Ambassador Chen, he said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. Your enthusiasm is charming, truly, but you must understand that a seat on the Security Council is not awarded for mere participation. He spoke the last word as if it tasted amusing. The council seats are held by civilizations that have proven themselves across epochs. The Vryloth Concordat has maintained peace in 17 sectors for 6,000 years. The Zethkar Collective has solved 3 extinction-level threats through pure computational wisdom. Even the youngest current member, the Draken hegemony, has a military tradition spanning 4,000 years. And humanity has existed in space for what? This came from Commander Thraxel of the Draken military caste, his scaled face twisting into what his species considered a smile. 8 decades. We have uniforms older than your space program. More laughter rippled through the chamber. Chen felt her jaw tighten, but she maintained her diplomatic composure. She had expected this. The briefings from Earth had prepared her for the condescension, the casual dismissal. Humanity may be young, Chen replied carefully, but we have much to offer. Our scientists have made breakthroughs in... Breakthroughs? Vrylanth interrupted gently, not unkindly. Dear Ambassador, every species makes breakthroughs. It is the nature of intelligence to discover and create. But wisdom, true wisdom, comes from time, from experience, from the evolutionary refinement that separates the ancient peoples from the newcomers. He spread his manipulators in a gesture that encompassed the entire upper levels of the chamber. We have made our mistakes, learned our lessons, and grown beyond the primitive impulses that plague younger species. You will understand in time. Perhaps in another 1,000 years we can revisit this petition. The dismissal was clear. The council speaker was already moving to the next item on the agenda when Chen spoke again. Then we request council mediation in a border dispute. This got their attention. Vrylanth turned back to her, curiosity evident in the tilt of his head. The Draken hegemony has laid claim to 3 colony worlds in the outer reaches. Chen continued. These worlds were legally settled by human colonists under the expansion accords of 2489. We have documentation, settlement records, and those worlds, Thraxel interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl, sit along strategic supply routes that the hegemony requires for sector security. The accords you cite are subject to interpretation under the Military Necessity Clause. There were 50,000 human civilians on those worlds, Chen said, her voice rising despite herself. You gave them 48 hours to evacuate before your fleets arrived. Many couldn't leave in time. You're holding our people. We are maintaining order, Thraxel replied coldly. Your colonists were trespassing on territory we require. They should be grateful we gave any warning at all. In the old days, the hegemony would have simply claimed the worlds and considered the inhabitants as spoils. Chen looked up at the council speaker, at Vreelanth, at the representatives of species that claimed to be wise and enlightened. You're not going to help, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Vreelanth's expression was almost sympathetic. Ambassador Chen, these disputes are common among younger species. They are part of the learning process. The Drakon hegemony is exercising their rights under established precedent. Perhaps this will teach humanity an important lesson about expanding too quickly, claiming territory beyond your ability to defend. So might makes right, Chen said. That's the lesson? Pragmatism makes right, Vreelanth corrected. The hegemony has the military strength to enforce their claim. You do not. This is the reality of galactic politics. In time, when humanity has grown, when you have built sufficient strength and proven your stability, then perhaps the galaxy will take your claims more seriously. Thraxel was watching Chen with an expression that might have been predatory satisfaction. We are not unreasonable, the Drakon commander said. We will give you 1 standard week to withdraw all human presence from the 3 disputed systems. In exchange, we will release your colonists unharmed and provide transport back to your territory. If you refuse, we will consider it an act of aggression and respond accordingly. You're threatening us, Chen said flatly. We are offering you a peaceful resolution to a situation you cannot win, Thraxel replied. Take the offer, Ambassador. The Draken hegemony has crushed civilizations older and stronger than yours. We have 500 warships currently deployed in that sector. How many does Earth have? 20, 30? Do not let pride drive your species to destruction. Chen looked around the chamber one more time. She saw boredom on some faces, amusement on others. The Zethkar delegate was already processing other matters, their crystalline structure pulsing with calculations that had nothing to do with humanity's plight. No one was going to help. No one cared enough to even try. She touched her communication device, opening a secure channel back to Earth. The conversation lasted less than a minute. When she closed the channel, something in her expression had changed. The frustration was gone, replaced by something else, something that Vreelanth, in his ancient wisdom, might have recognized if he had been paying closer attention. It was the look of someone who had just stopped playing by rules they never wanted to follow in the first place. Ambassador? The council speaker prompted. Do you accept the hegemony's terms? Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady and cold. You want to know something interesting about humanity, she said. We kept detailed records of our history before we joined the galactic community. We made sure every species could access them, translated into every known language, but I don't think any of you actually read them. You saw that we were young, that we'd only been in space for a few decades, and you made assumptions. Ambassador, this is not the time for, Vreelanth began. We fought each other, Chen continued, speaking over him. For 10,000 years we fought. Tribe against tribe, nation against nation, ideology against ideology. We invented weapons you can't imagine. Tactics you'd consider dishonorable, strategies you'd call insane. We bombed our own cities. We burned our own forests. We created weapons that could destroy our entire world, and came within minutes of using them. Not once, multiple times. The chamber had gone silent. Chen had everyone's attention now. And somehow we survived. We learned. We stopped fighting each other and looked up at the stars. We built ships and came out here, hoping to find something better, hoping to be part of a community where problems were solved with words instead of weapons. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. That was naive of us. What is your point? Thraxel demanded. Chen met the Draken commander's eyes. My point is that you think this is us at full strength. You think the 37 registered human warships represent our military capacity? You think 80 years in space is all we are? She smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Is that a threat? Thraxel's hand moved to his sidearm. No, Chen said. It's a statement of fact. We came to the Council for mediation, because that's what civilized people do. We tried diplomacy because that's what we promised ourselves we'd do when we left Earth. But you've made it very clear that diplomacy doesn't work here. That strength is the only language the galaxy respects. She began gathering her materials, preparing to leave the chamber. The United Earth government rejects the Draken hegemony's ultimatum, Chen said formally. We will not abandon our colonists. We will not surrender legally settled worlds. And we will not accept that might makes right, no matter how many ancient species tell us that's just how things are done. Vrilinth leaned forward on his platform. Ambassador Chen, please reconsider. This is not— We tried, Chen interrupted. Remember that. When this is over, when you're trying to understand what happened, remember that we tried diplomacy first. We came to you, asking for help, asking to be part of your system, and you laughed at us. She deactivated her platform and began walking toward the chamber exit. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. 1 week, Thraxel called after her. You have 1 week to comply, or the hegemony will take corrective action. And make no mistake, human, your species will learn the price of defiance. Chen stopped at the doorway and looked back at the Draken commander. For just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Something that made even Thraxel, veteran of 100 campaigns, feel the faintest touch of unease. No, Chen said quietly. You'll learn the price of underestimating us. Then she was gone, and the chamber erupted into conversation. Some species expressed concern about the coming conflict. Others placed bets on how quickly the Drakon hegemony would crush the human resistance. Vrilinth sat in silence, replaying Chen's words in his mind, trying to understand why they bothered him. He had lived for 900 years. He had seen countless younger species rise and fall, watched them make their mistakes and learn their lessons. This should have been just another teaching moment, another civilization learning the hard way that the galaxy was vast and indifferent to the pride of newcomers. But something in Chen's voice in that final look suggested that perhaps the lesson was going to be different than he expected. Perhaps the teacher and the student were about to change places. In the depths of the Drakon hegemony's military command, Thraxel reviewed the tactical situation with his senior officers. 3 colony worlds, minimal defenses, and an enemy with fewer than 40 ships. The campaign would be over in days, a minor footnote in the hegemony's glorious military history. None of them noticed the subtle anomalies in their communication systems, the tiny fragments of code that had been embedding themselves in Draken networks for months. None of them realized that while they had been dismissing humanity as weak and naive, human intelligence services had been very, very busy. The week began counting down. The galaxy watched with mild interest, expecting a brief conflict followed by humanity's inevitable submission. They had seen it all before. The young and proud always had to learn the hard way. But there was one thing the galaxy hadn't considered. One simple fact that would change everything. Humanity had learned those lessons a long time ago. On a small blue world in wars too numerous to count, fighting enemies who spoke their own languages and shared their own DNA. They had learned about total war, about survival at any cost, about the terrible things that intelligent beings were capable of when pushed to the edge. They had learned those lessons so well that they had promised themselves never to use them again. That promise was about to be broken. The Drakon hegemony's war fleet assembled at the edge of the New Harmony system, like a steel constellation. 500 warships, each one a masterpiece of military engineering refined over 4 millennia of constant warfare. The smallest destroyer massed 3,000 tons. The largest dreadnoughts displaced over 2 million. Their hulls scarred from dozens of previous campaigns. Commander Thraxel stood on the bridge of the Endless Glory, his flagship and the pride of the hegemony's Third Fleet. Around him, his officers moved with practiced efficiency, checking systems and preparing for what they all assumed would be a very short battle. Through the main view screen, Thraxel could see the distant blue-white star that humans had named New Harmony. Somewhere in orbit around the third planet, human colonists were scrambling to evacuate or preparing to watch their world be conquered. The commander felt no particular animosity toward the humans. This was simply business. They had settled where they should not have settled. They had refused reasonable terms. Now they would learn what happened when a young species forgot its place in the galactic order. The lesson would be harsh but necessary. Other young civilizations would watch and remember. All ships report ready, his tactical officer announced. The fleet is at full combat readiness. Scan the system, Thraxel ordered. Show me what we're facing. The view screen shifted to display tactical data. New Harmony III appeared as a green sphere, marked with the locations of major settlements. Orbital stations glowed as amber dots, and between the fleet and the planet, a pathetically small defense force waited. Enemy contacts, the sensor officer reported. 12 human vessels. Classification, frigate and destroyer class. Total estimated mass, less than 200,000 tons combined. A ripple of amusement passed through the bridge crew. Thraxel examined the human ships carefully. They looked crude to his experienced eye, utilitarian designs lacking the elegant menace of proper warships. They were probably converted civilian vessels, pressed into military service because humanity simply didn't have enough real warships to defend all their scattered colonies. Open a wideband transmission, Thraxel commanded. Let's give them one final chance to be reasonable. The communication officer worked his console, then nodded. Thraxel straightened his uniform and faced the transmission pickup. Human defenders of New Harmony, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. I am Commander Thraxel of the Draken Hegemony's Third Fleet. You are vastly outmatched and cannot possibly prevail in combat. I offer you terms. Stand down immediately. Allow our forces to occupy the planet peacefully and no harm will come to your colonists. They will be permitted to leave with their personal possessions. Resist and we will be forced to respond with overwhelming force. You have 10 minutes to reply. He cut the transmission and waited. Around him, officers checked their weapon systems. The endless glory alone mounted enough firepower to glass the surface of a small moon. The humans had to know they couldn't win. Surely even these proud newcomers would see reason when faced with such impossible odds. The reply came after 6 minutes. The image that appeared on the view screen showed a woman in her 50s, wearing a simple uniform with no elaborate decorations. Her hair was streaked with gray, and her eyes held the kind of tired determination that Thraxel had seen in garrison commanders who knew they were about to die but would fight anyway out of sheer stubbornness. Commander Thraxel, she said. I'm Admiral Catherine Rodriguez, commanding officer of the New Harmony Defense Fleet. I've heard your terms and I have a counteroffer. Turn your fleet around and go home. Leave our system and our colonists in peace. Do that and we won't destroy you. The bridge of the endless glory erupted in laughter. Even Thraxel couldn't suppress a snort of amusement. Destroy them? With 12 ships against 500? The humans weren't just proud. They were delusional. Admiral Rodriguez, Thraxel said, still chuckling. I admire your courage, but you're playing with toys and pretending they're weapons. Your ships are barely fit for cargo hauling, let alone combat against a proper military fleet. Stand down. There's no shame in acknowledging reality. Rodriguez didn't smile. She didn't even blink. You have 5 minutes to begin your retreat. After that, we engage. Rodriguez out, the transmission ended. Thraxel stared at the blank screen for a moment, then shook his head. Some people have to learn through pain, he muttered. Tactical, prepare to advance. Target their ships with precision fire. I want them disabled, not destroyed. These humans need to survive long enough to understand the magnitude of their mistake. The fleet began moving forward, a massive wave of military power that had broken the defenses of dozens of star systems. Thraxel watched the tactical display as his ships organized into standard assault formation. The human vessels maintained their position, not retreating but not advancing either. Perhaps they were finally understanding the futility of resistance. Then something impossible happened. Commander, the sensor officer's voice rose in alarm. The human ships just vanished. Thraxel spun toward the sensor station. What do you mean vanished? They're gone, sir. All 12 ships dropped off sensors simultaneously. No energy signatures, no mass readings, nothing. That's impossible, the tactical officer said. Even full stealth systems leave traces. Check for electronic warfare, sensor jamming. Negative, sir. Our systems are functioning normally. The ships simply aren't there anymore. Thraxel felt a cold finger of unease trace down his spine. In 4,000 years of recorded military history, no species had developed perfect stealth technology. The laws of physics made it impossible to completely mask a ship's presence. Heat signatures, gravitational distortions, quantum fluctuations. There were always traces. All ships full sensor sweep, he ordered. Find those ships. They can't just disappear. For 3 minutes, 500 Dracon warships scoured the system with every detection system they possessed. They found nothing. The human ships were simply gone, as if they had never existed. Sir, the communication officer said hesitantly, we're receiving a transmission. Audio only. Sources everywhere. It's coming from every direction at once. Play it. Admiral Rodriguez's voice filled the bridge, but now it carried an edge that hadn't been there before. I gave you 5 minutes, Commander. You didn't take the offer. That was a mistake. Show yourself, Thraxel demanded. Stop hiding and face us like warriors. Hiding? Rodriguez sounded genuinely puzzled. Commander, we're not hiding. We're already here. We've been here for months. The explosion started from within. The first Dracon ship to die was a destroyer on the fleet's outer edge. Its reactor containment failed catastrophically, and the vessel came apart in a brilliant flash of light. Before anyone could react, 2 more ships exploded. Then 5, then 20. We're under attack, the tactical officer shouted unnecessarily. The main view screen showed dozens of Dracon vessels dying, torn apart by internal explosions or massive system failures. How? Thraxel roared. Where are they shooting from? They're not shooting at us, sir. The sensor officer's voice was panicked now. The damage is coming from inside the ships. Our own systems are turning against us. Thraxel's blood turned to ice. Check the Endless Glory systems. Full diagnostic now. The engineering officer worked frantically at his console, then went pale. Sir, there's code embedded throughout our network. It's been there for... It looks like months. It's in everything. Navigation, weapons, life support, communications. It's waiting for activation commands. Purge it. Shut down all networked systems. Sir, if we do that, we'll be dead in space. No propulsion, no weapons, no... Do it anyway. Send the order fleet-wide. But it was too late. Across the entire Dracon Armada, the malicious code activated simultaneously. Ships that had been preparing to bombard a human colony found their weapons turning inward, tearing through their own hulls. Navigation systems sent vessels spiraling into each other or into the system's asteroid field. Life support failed on 30 ships at once, leaving crews gasping in the cold vacuum of space. And then the defense platforms appeared. They had been there all along, hidden in the asteroid belt on moons, even in orbit around the gas giant at the system's edge. Hundreds of weapons platforms, each one bristling with weapons that no other species had seen before. They began firing, adding to the chaos, but these weren't conventional weapons. The platforms launched what looked like small missiles, but they moved with impossible agility, dodging point defense fire that should have destroyed them easily. When they struck Dracon ships, they didn't explode. They burrowed. What are those things? Thraxel demanded as he watched one of the missiles drill through a dreadnought's armor like it was paper. Nanite swarms, the sensor officer whispered, reading the analysis. They're breaking down our ships at the molecular level. The human fleet reappeared. The 12 ships dropped their stealth, but now Thraxel could see that they weren't crude converted freighters at all. They were sleek predatory vessels that made his own warships look clumsy by comparison. And there weren't 12 anymore. There were at least 50, decloaking from positions throughout the system. Admiral Rodriguez's voice returned to the communication channel. Did you really think we'd been in space for 80 years and this is all we'd built? Commander, we showed the galaxy 37 ships. We registered them, let your spies photograph them, made sure everyone saw them. Meanwhile, we were building the real fleet in hidden shipyards. We were developing weapons your species banned centuries ago because they scared you, and we were studying you. Another wave of Dracon ships died. The fleet that had numbered 500 now barely mustered 200 operational vessels, and that number was dropping by the minute. We studied all of you, Rodriguez continued. Your security protocols, your network architectures, your social engineering vulnerabilities. Do you know how we got our code into your systems, Commander? We befriended your engineers. We met them at conferences, bought them drinks, listened to their complaints about their work. We offered helpful suggestions about optimizing their networks, and they implemented our improvements, never realizing they were installing backdoors that we could activate whenever we wanted. Thraxel wanted to rage, to fight back, but the Endless Glory was barely responding to commands. Half his systems were compromised, and engineering was reporting that the ship's reactor was becoming unstable. You're right that we're young, Rodriguez said, We've only been in space for 80 years. But we've been fighting for 10,000 years. We know war in ways you can't imagine. We know how to be patient, how to appear weak, how to smile at our enemies while preparing their destruction. You thought you were teaching us a lesson about strength. But the lesson you're about to learn is much more important. Never underestimate an enemy just because they're young. The human ships moved through the dying Dracon fleet like sharks through a school of fish. They targeted disabled vessels, systematically destroying any ship that still showed signs of weapon capability. But they were also careful. Any Dracon ship that powered down completely was left intact. Any vessel that launched escape pods was allowed to do so unmolested. "Commander," Rodriguez said, and now her voice was almost gentle, "you're going to survive this. Your flagship has been flagged as a survivor candidate. We've already stabilized your reactor. In a few minutes, we're going to shut down our attack, and you'll find that your essential systems come back online. You'll have enough power to return to Dracon space." "Why?" Thraxel asked. The word came out as a broken whisper. Around him, his bridge crew sat in stunned silence, watching their fleet die on the tactical displays. "Because someone needs to tell the story," Rodriguez replied. "Someone needs to explain to the Galactic Council what happened here. Make sure your sensors are recording everything, Commander. We want them to see." The human ships began the final phase of their attack. The nanite swarms completed their work, reducing mighty dreadnoughts to clouds of their component atoms. The hidden weapons platforms maintained their fire, ensuring that no Draken vessel escaped that was capable of returning to fight another day. And through it all, the human ships moved with a precision that spoke of careful planning and countless hours of training. 17 minutes after the first shot was fired, it was over. Of the 500 ships that had entered the New Harmony system, 463 were destroyed or disabled beyond repair. 37 vessels remained operational, all of them carefully selected by human tactical computers as ships that would be able to limp home with their stories. The Endless Glory was one of them. Thraxel sat in his command chair, staring at the tactical display that showed the wreckage of his fleet scattered across the system. Escape pods drifted among the debris, each one marked with a transponder so that rescue vessels could find them. The humans were already deploying recovery craft, pulling Dracon survivors out of the void. "Your crew will be treated according to the Galactic Conventions on Prisoners of War," Rodriguez said. "We'll return them to you within the week. The wounded will receive medical treatment. The dead will be honored and returned to their families if that's what your customs require." "I don't understand," Thraxel said numbly. "If you could do this, why did you let us think you were weak? Why not reveal your strength from the beginning?" "Because we hoped we wouldn't have to use it," Rodriguez answered, and for the first time there was genuine sadness in her voice. "We came to the stars hoping to find something better than what we left behind on Earth. We wanted to believe that the galaxy was civilized, that disputes could be resolved through dialogue and compromise. We wanted to be part of something greater than ourselves." She paused, and Thraxel could hear the weight of disappointment in her silence. "But you taught us that the galaxy respects only strength, that being weak or appearing weak only invites aggression. So we stopped pretending. We showed you what we really are, what we've always been underneath the hope and the diplomatic smiles." "What are you?" Thraxel asked. "Survivors," Rodriguez said simply. "We survived 10,000 years of wars on our own world. We survived our own worst impulses, and now we're going to survive out here whether the galaxy likes it or not." The transmission ended. Thraxel sat in silence as his ship's system slowly came back online, just as Rodriguez had promised. He looked out at the wreckage of his fleet, at the human vessels patrolling the battlefield like victorious wolves, and he understood with complete clarity that everything had just changed. The galaxy had 47 species, each one convinced of their own superiority, their own wisdom, their own place in the cosmic order. They had built that order on the assumption that age equaled strength, that experience equaled power, that the young could be safely dismissed and controlled. In 17 minutes, humanity had shattered that assumption. They had revealed themselves to be something the galaxy hadn't encountered before. A species that had learned the lessons of warfare so thoroughly, so completely, that they could hide their true nature behind a mask of weakness until the perfect moment to strike. As the Endless Glory began its long, humiliating journey back to Dracon space, Thraxel composed his report. He chose each word carefully, knowing that what he wrote would shape the galaxy's understanding of what had happened. He described the attack in clinical detail. the evidence of months of preparation, the sophisticated technology that humanity had kept hidden, the cold efficiency of their assault. And at the end, he added a personal note, a warning written by a commander who had just learned the most expensive lesson of his career. We underestimated them. We saw them as children playing at civilization. We were wrong. The humans are not children. They are predators who learn to wear the mask of prey, and if we are not careful, if the galaxy does not take this threat seriously, they will devour us all. He sent the report and then sat back in his chair, exhausted. Through the view screen, he could see the human ships growing smaller as the endless glory retreated. They were not pursuing. They had made their point. The galaxy would receive his report within hours. The Galactic Council would convene an emergency session. Ambassadors would panic, military forces would mobilize, and politicians would make speeches about the human threat. But Thraxel knew the truth that few others had realized yet. It was already too late. If humanity could do this at one colony with only a fraction of their forces, what could they do with their full strength? What other weapons had they developed in secret? What other preparations had they made while the galaxy dismissed them as insignificant? The answer to those questions terrified him more than anything he had experienced in 40 years of military service. In the New Harmony system, Admiral Rodriguez watched the surviving Draken ships retreat. Around her, her crew was celebrating, but she felt no joy. They had won a battle, but at the cost of revealing secrets they had hoped never to use. "Send a message to Earth Command," she ordered. "Tell them it's done. The galaxy knows what we are now." As the message streamed across the light years toward humanity's homeworld, Rodriguez wondered what would come next. Would the galaxy try to destroy them out of fear? Would they seek alliance out of respect? Or would they simply leave humanity alone, too frightened to risk another confrontation? She didn't know. But she did know one thing with absolute certainty. The galaxy would never laugh at humanity again. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 36 hours after the New Harmony incident. The chamber was packed beyond its normal capacity. Species that rarely bothered with council affairs had sent representatives. Military observers lined the walls. Intelligence officers monitored every conversation. The age-old chamber, which had witnessed 10,000 years of measured debate and careful diplomacy, now crackled with fear and anger. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood on her platform, which had been moved from its lowly position on the floor to a spot roughly at mid-level. The council had made the adjustment without explanation, but everyone understood what it meant. Humanity could no longer be dismissed as insignificant. She waited patiently while the chamber settled. Around her, she could see the faces and forms of species that had laughed at her petition just weeks earlier. None of them were laughing now. Some looked frightened. Others appeared angry. A few, including Ambassador Vrilanth of the Vriloth Concordat, simply looked thoughtful. The council speaker, his crystalline form pulsing with colors that indicated stress and uncertainty, called the session to order. "We are here," he announced, his voice resonating through translation matrices, "to address the incident at New Harmony and to receive an explanation from the human delegation regarding technology and capabilities that were not disclosed during humanity's application to the galactic community." Chen had prepared her response carefully. She had consulted with Earth's military command, diplomatic corps, and political leadership. They had debated for hours about what to reveal and what to keep hidden. In the end, they had decided on a simple approach: tell the truth. Most of it anyway. "Members of the council," Chen began, her voice steady and clear. "I will answer all questions honestly and completely, but first I want to show you something that I believe will help you understand what happened at New Harmony, and why." She activated her presentation system, and the air above the chamber floor filled with images. The first was a view of Earth from space, the familiar blue and white sphere that had been humanity's home for millions of years. "This is where we come from," Chen said. "A single world orbiting a single star in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. For most of our history, we didn't even know there were other worlds, other species, other civilizations. We were alone, or so we thought." The image shifted to show ancient battlefields. Warriors with primitive weapons clashed in clouds of dust and blood. The scenes progressed through history. Armies with swords and shields, soldiers with rifles and cannons, tanks rolling across devastated landscapes, aircraft dropping bombs on cities. We fought, Chen said simply. For as long as we have records, we fought. Tribe against tribe, city-state against city-state, nation against nation. We fought over territory, resources, beliefs, and sometimes just because one group was different from another. We created weapons designed to kill as efficiently as possible. We studied warfare the way your scientists study physics. The images continued. Mushroom clouds rose over devastated cities. Soldiers in protective gear moved through chemical weapon zones. Automated drones hunted targets in urban environments. The council watched in silence, and Chen could see the growing horror on many faces. We invented nuclear weapons, she continued. Devices that could destroy entire cities in seconds. We built thousands of them. We pointed them at each other and came within minutes of destroying our own civilization. Not once, multiple times. The images shifted to show different types of warfare. Guerrilla fighters hiding in jungles, cyber attacks crippling infrastructure, biological weapons research facilities, psychological warfare campaigns, information warfare and propaganda. The variety was staggering. A catalog of 10,000 years of humans learning how to hurt and kill each other more effectively. We didn't fight the way you do, Chen said, and now she looked directly at Commander Thraxel, who had been ordered to attend the session. Your species, the Dracon, have a proud warrior tradition. You fight with honor, following rules of engagement that have been refined over millennia. You have codes and customs. When you go to war, both sides understand the boundaries. She paused, letting that sink in. We had no such boundaries. When we fought to win by any means necessary. We hacked each other's communication networks. We spread false information to confuse our enemies. We pretended to be weak to lure opponents into traps. We used children as soldiers and civilians as shields. We bombed hospitals and poisoned water supplies. We did things that would make your military historians weep. The chamber was absolutely silent. The images had stopped on a single photograph. A human city reduced to rubble with survivors wandering through the destruction. I'm not proud of this history, Chen said quietly. None of us are. It's a legacy of shame that every human child learns about. We teach it in our schools not to glorify it, but to make sure we never forget what we're capable of when we lose our way. Ambassador Vrillanth spoke for the first time. Then why are you showing us this? To frighten us. To explain, Chen replied. You need to understand what we are, not what we pretend to be, not what we wish we were, but what 10,000 years of constant warfare made us. We are a species that survived by becoming very, very good at killing. She changed the image to show the moment when humanity had finally achieved peace, not through conquest but through exhaustion, not through military victory but through the collective realization that they would destroy themselves if they continued. Eventually we stopped, Chen said. We built a global government. We redirected our resources from weapons to space exploration. We promised ourselves that when we reached the stars we would be different. We would be better. We would leave the violence and the brutality behind. The images showed the early days of human space exploration. Crude rockets giving way to more sophisticated vessels. The first colonies on Mars and the Moon. The development of faster-than-light travel. The joy on human faces when they received the signal from the galactic community, welcoming them to join the civilization of the stars. We meant that promise, Chen said. When we joined the galactic community, we truly wanted to be part of something better. We declared only a fraction of our military capabilities because we didn't want to seem threatening. We pretended to be weaker than we were because we thought that's what civilized species did. We tried to resolve disputes through dialogue because that's what we had promised ourselves we would do. Now her voice hardened. And you laughed at us. You dismissed us as children. When we came to you for help, when our colonists were threatened, you told us that might makes right and that we needed to learn our place. You taught us that the galaxy doesn't respect peaceful intentions. It respects power. Chen looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives who had mocked humanity's weakness just weeks before. So we showed you power. At New Harmony, we demonstrated a fraction of what we're actually capable of. The stealth technology that made our ships invisible. The cyber warfare capabilities that let us compromise an entire enemy fleet before the battle even began. The weapons systems that your species banned centuries ago because they scared you too much to use. The tactics that you would consider dishonorable or unfair. She pulled up the tactical data from the New Harmony battle. The council members watched as the Draken fleet was systematically dismantled in 17 minutes. Some of you are wondering what else we've hidden, Chen said. Some of you are calculating whether your defenses could withstand a similar attack. Some of you are probably considering whether to try to destroy humanity before we become too dangerous. She let that hang in the air for a moment. Let me save you the trouble of guessing. We currently have 15,000 warships, not the 37 we registered. We have defensive satellites around every human world capable of destroying entire fleets. We have cyber warfare divisions that have been inside your network since the day we joined the galactic community. We know your security protocols, your military capabilities, your economic vulnerabilities. We've been watching, learning, and preparing. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted questions and accusations. Security officers moved nervously toward their weapons. The council speaker struggled to restore order. Chen waited for the noise to die down, then continued. But here's what you need to understand. And this is the most important thing I will say today. We don't want to use any of this. We built our military capabilities as insurance, as a deterrent, because we've learned that the only way to prevent war is to be so terrifyingly capable of winning it that no one dares to start one. She pulled up a new image. This one showed human colonies, peaceful settlements where children played in the streets and farms stretched across fertile valleys. Research stations where human and alien scientists worked side by side. Trade stations where merchants from dozens of species exchanged goods and ideas. This is what we want, Chen said. We want to build, to grow, to explore. We want our children to grow up in a galaxy where disputes are resolved through dialogue, where strength is measured by what you create rather than what you can destroy. We want to be part of a community that values wisdom and cooperation. Ambassador Vrillanth rose from his platform. The ancient Vryloth looked tired, as if the weight of his 900 years had suddenly caught up with him. Ambassador Chen, he said carefully, what you're describing is the galaxy we thought we had built. The very system you're criticizing. Why should we believe that humanity wants peace, when you've just demonstrated such devastating military capability? Chen met his gaze steadily. Because we could have destroyed the entire Dracon fleet at New Harmony. We could have killed every single one of their soldiers. But we didn't. We disabled their ships, not destroyed them. We pulled their survivors from space and gave them medical treatment. We let witnesses survive specifically so they could tell this story. She gestured to Commander Thraxel. The commander is alive because we chose to let him live. His crew is alive because we chose mercy over vengeance. We could have sent a message written in the blood of our enemies. Instead, we sent a message that says we can kill you, but we choose not to. We have the power to destroy, but we prefer to build. The Zethkar Collective's delegate, its crystalline structure pulsing with rapid calculations, spoke for the first time. Your logic is sound but incomplete. You have demonstrated restraint in one engagement. How can we trust that this restraint will continue? How do we know you won't use this hidden military power to conquer the galaxy? You don't, Chen admitted. You can't know for certain, any more than we can know for certain that other species won't attack us. That's the fundamental nature of existence in a galaxy full of competing civilizations. But let me ask you this. In the 10,000 years before humanity arrived, how many wars were fought? How many species were conquered by their neighbors? How many times did the strong take from the weak simply because they could? The Zethkar delegate was silent. The answer was obvious to everyone in the chamber. The galaxy's history was written in conquest and subjugation. The Draken hegemony alone had absorbed 17 smaller species over the past 2 millennia. We're not introducing violence to a peaceful galaxy, Chen said. Violence was already here. What we're introducing is the possibility of something different. A new balance of power where aggression has consequences severe enough to make even the strongest species think twice. She brought up a proposal that had been drafted by Earth's diplomatic corps. The United Earth government proposes a new framework for galactic governance, one that includes the following principles. Equal representation for all species regardless of age or military power. Binding arbitration for all disputes with enforcement mechanisms that actually work. A mutual defense pact where an attack on one species is treated as an attack on all. And transparency requirements for military capabilities so that no species can hide their true strength, the way we did. The chamber fell silent as representatives absorbed the proposal. It was radical. A complete restructuring of the galactic order that had existed for millennia. You're asking us to give up the system that has maintained stability for thousands of years, Vrillanth said. I'm asking you to give up a system that only worked for the strong, Chen replied. A system where species like humanity had to hide their true capabilities to avoid being preemptively attacked. A system where might made right and the weak had no recourse against the strong. She looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. We came to the stars hoping to find something better. We didn't find it, so we're going to build it. The question for all of you is whether you want to help us build it, or whether you want to try to stop us. Commander Thraxel stood. The Draken warrior looked diminished somehow, as if the defeat at New Harmony had taken something from him beyond just ships and soldiers. I have a question, he said. If humanity is so powerful, why didn't you conquer the Draken hegemony after destroying our fleet? You could have struck at our homeworld while our defenses were in disarray. Chen turned to face him. Because we're not conquerors, Commander. We're survivors. There's a difference. Conquerors take because they can. Survivors do what's necessary to protect what's theirs. You threatened our colonies. We stopped the threat. The moment you ceased to be a danger, we ceased our attack. And if we attack again? Thraxel asked. Then we'll stop you again, Chen said simply. And we'll keep stopping you until you understand that attacking humanity is not worth the cost. She turned back to address the full council. That's the message we want to send to the entire galaxy. We're not interested in empire. We're not interested in domination, but we will defend what's ours with every weapon and tactic we possess. Push us and you'll discover just how deep our arsenal goes. Leave us alone. Treat us with respect and you'll find that we're generous allies and valuable partners. The council speaker finally spoke again, his crystalline form stabilizing as he processed everything he had heard. The council will need time to consider your proposal, Ambassador Chen. This is a fundamental restructuring of galactic governance. It cannot be decided in a single session. I understand, Chen replied. Take all the time you need. But understand this. Whether the council accepts our proposal or not, humanity will no longer pretend to be weak. We will no longer accept that age gives one species the right to dominate another, and we will no longer trust that the galaxy's existing systems will protect our interests. She gathered her materials and prepared to leave the platform. One more thing, she added. For those species considering military action against humanity, I want to share one final piece of information. Everything you saw at New Harmony, all the technology and tactics we demonstrated, that was just the defensive capabilities of a single colony. We have 347 colonies. We have industrial capacity that dwarfs most galactic civilizations because we spent 80 years building, while you dismissed us as irrelevant. And we have a population that remembers what it means to fight for survival. She paused at the edge of her platform. We hoped we'd never have to say this, but the galaxy has made it necessary, so here it is. Humanity is not prey. We never were. We were predators pretending to be prey until we decided to stop pretending. Remember that the next time someone thinks about testing our resolve. Chen left the chamber. Behind her, the council erupted into heated debate. Some called for immediate military action to contain the human threat. Others argued for accepting the proposal and rebuilding the galactic order. Still others simply sat in silence, trying to absorb the implications of what they had just learned. Ambassador Vreelanth remained in his seat long after most others had left. He was old enough to remember when the Vryloth Concordat had been a younger species, fighting to establish themselves in a galaxy dominated by others. They had succeeded through patience, wisdom, and careful accumulation of power. It had taken them 3,000 years. Humanity had done something similar in 80 years, and they had done it while making the galaxy think they were harmless. For the first time in his 900 years of life, Vreelanth felt something he had not experienced before. Not fear exactly, something more subtle. It was the uncomfortable realization that everything he thought he understood about power, wisdom, and the natural order of civilizations might be completely wrong. The humans hadn't just revealed hidden military capabilities. They had revealed a completely different way of thinking about survival and power, one that the galaxy in its ancient wisdom and confidence had never encountered before. And now that the galaxy knew what humanity was capable of, Vreelanth wondered if anyone could predict what would happen next. The old order was crumbling. Something new was being born. Whether that new order would be better or worse than what came before, only time would tell. But one thing was certain, the galaxy would never be the same. The coalition formed in secret over the course of 3 months. The Vryloth Concordat, the Zethkar Collective, and what remained of the Drakon hegemony's military leadership met in a secure location far from the prying sensors of human intelligence networks. Or so they believed. Ambassador Vreelanth stood before the assembled military commanders and political leaders of three of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. The Vryloth Elder had argued against this gathering, had counseled patience and dialogue, but he had been overruled by younger, more aggressive voices within his own government. The humans have made their intentions clear, declared High Commander Zethral of the Zethkar military forces. His crystalline body pulsed with colors indicating absolute certainty. They possess weapons that threaten the entire galactic order. They have infiltrated our networks, hidden military capabilities that dwarf our own, and demonstrated a willingness to use overwhelming force. If we allow them to continue unchecked, they will dominate the galaxy within a generation. Warlord Krathix, who had replaced the disgraced Thraxel as the Draken Hegemony's supreme military commander, nodded his massive head in agreement. The scales around his neck flared in a display of aggressive intent. The hegemony has never retreated from a worthy enemy. Krathix growled. The humans dealt us a devastating blow, yes, but it was through deception and dishonorable tactics. In a fair fight, warrior to warrior, fleet to fleet, they cannot match our combat experience. Vreelanth listened to his colleagues with growing concern. They were making the same mistakes they had made before. They were underestimating humanity because the truth was too frightening to fully accept. You're not listening to what the humans told us, Vreelanth said quietly. They don't fight fair. They fight to win. There's a difference. Which is precisely why they must be stopped, High Commander Zethral insisted. The Galactic Council has debated their proposal for 3 months while they continue to build their forces. Our intelligence suggests they're constructing new shipyards, developing even more advanced weapons, and expanding their influence among smaller species who see them as protectors against the traditional powers. This last point struck home with many in the room. Several younger species had already approached humanity with requests for defense treaties. The humans, with their overwhelming military power and their speeches about equality and mutual respect, were becoming dangerously attractive as allies. If we allow this to continue, Zethral continued, the humans will have built an alliance bloc that rivals our own. They will have turned the galaxy's power structure upside down. We must act now, while we still have numerical superiority. The plan they had developed was comprehensive. 3,000 ships from the combined fleets of the Coalition would advance on the Sol system itself. Not on scattered colonies where humanity might have hidden defenses, but on Earth, the human homeworld. The goal was not to conquer or destroy, but to demonstrate overwhelming force and compel humanity to accept restrictions on their military expansion. It was, they assured themselves, a measured response. A show of strength that would bring humanity to the negotiating table from a position of weakness. They would demand full disclosure of military capabilities, mandatory inspections of human shipyards, and strict limitations on the types of weapons humanity could develop. Vreelanth knew it was a mistake. He had watched the recordings from New Harmony 100 times. He had analyzed every word of Ambassador Chen's speech to the Council. He understood something that his colleagues either couldn't or wouldn't grasp. Humanity had been planning for exactly this scenario since the day they joined the galactic community. But he was one voice among many, and the Coalition had made its decision. The fleet began assembling in the outer reaches, far from human territory. 3,000 warships from 3 different civilizations, each with their own tactics and traditions, working to coordinate an assault on the most dangerous enemy any of them had ever faced. On Earth, in a secure command center beneath the city of Geneva, Admiral James Chen, brother to Ambassador Sarah Chen, watched the Coalition fleet assemble on holographic displays. Human intelligence networks had been tracking the Coalition's movement since the first secret meetings. Every communication, every ship movement, every strategic discussion had been monitored and analyzed. They're really going to do it, said General Elizabeth Morrison, the Supreme Commander of Earth's Defense Forces. They're actually going to attack Earth, Admiral Chen nodded slowly. He was a veteran of the Unification Wars, the last great conflicts on Earth before humanity had achieved global peace. He had seen warfare at its most brutal, had commanded forces in battles that most of humanity preferred to forget. Now, decades later, he found himself preparing for something he had hoped would never happen. We gave them every chance to back down, Chen said. We demonstrated our capabilities. We explained our intentions. We offered a peaceful resolution, and they responded by assembling the largest invasion force in recorded galactic history. Should we strike first? Morrison asked. We know where their fleet is staging. We could hit them before they're fully prepared. Chen shook his head. No, if we strike first, we become the aggressors. We prove that their fears about us are justified. The coalition has to fire the first shot. The galaxy has to see that we were defending ourselves, not seeking conquest. Even if it costs us more casualties. Even then, Chen confirmed. Our goal isn't just to win the battle. It's to win the peace that follows. He pulled up tactical displays showing Earth's defensive network. What the coalition didn't know, what no other species had yet realized, was that humanity's 80 years of peaceful space exploration had included the most comprehensive defensive infrastructure any civilization had ever built. When they come, Chen said, we'll be ready. The coalition fleet entered human space 2 weeks later, 3,000 warships arranged in a massive formation that stretched across hundreds of thousands of kilometers. They advanced on the Sol system with their weapons powered but not yet targeting, a show of force designed to intimidate rather than destroy. High Commander Zethral broadcast a message on all frequencies as the fleet crossed into the solar system. United Earth Government. This is the Coalition for Galactic Stability. We are here to ensure the security of all species in the galaxy. You will power down your defensive systems and allow Coalition inspection teams to board your vessels and visit your shipyards. You will provide complete disclosure of all military capabilities and submit to reasonable restrictions on future development. Comply with these demands and no blood will be shed today. Resist and we will be forced to take corrective action. The response came not from Ambassador Chen at the Council chambers, but from Admiral Chen in Earth's Defense Command. Coalition Fleet, this is Admiral James Chen, Supreme Commander of Earth's Defense Forces. You have entered sovereign human territory with a military fleet and made demands backed by threat of force. This is an act of war. You have one opportunity to withdraw. Turn your fleet around and depart our space immediately. If you proceed, we will consider it an attack and respond accordingly. Admiral, Zethral replied, his tone almost patient. You are facing 3,000 warships. You cannot possibly prevail. Be reasonable. You're right, Chen agreed. 3,000 ships is a lot. But you're making the same mistake the Dracon made. You think you know what you're facing. You don't. We've analyzed the data from New Harmony extensively, Zethral countered. We've adapted our security protocols, hardened our networks, and prepared countermeasures for your stealth technology. Your tricks won't work twice. New Harmony was a colony, Chen said quietly. You're attacking our homeworld. Do you really think we'd defend Earth the same way we'd defend a frontier settlement? For just a moment, Zethral felt a flicker of doubt. Then he pushed it aside. His analysts had been clear. Humanity had perhaps 20,000 ships at most. The Coalition had superior numbers, and they had learned from the Dracon's mistakes. This would be difficult, perhaps costly, but ultimately successful. Final warning, Admiral, Zethral said. Stand down or be destroyed. No, Chen replied. Come and take it. The Coalition fleet advanced. As they crossed the orbit of Neptune, their sensors began detecting human vessels. Hundreds of them, then thousands emerging from stealth or accelerating in from positions throughout the solar system. The Coalition's numerical advantage began to evaporate as more and more human ships appeared. They've been hiding their entire fleet in their home system, one of Zethral's tactical officers reported, his crystalline structure pulsing with alarm. Ship count is now over 15,000 and still rising. But the Coalition had expected this. They had known humanity would defend Earth with everything they had. The invasion force pressed forward, weapon systems coming online, targeting solutions being calculated for thousands of enemy vessels. Then Earth's real defenses activated. The first indication that something was wrong came when the Coalition's faster-than-light communication systems failed. Every ship in the fleet suddenly found itself unable to communicate with its neighbors. Command and control networks that had been operating perfectly moments before simply ceased to function. We're being jammed, a Dracon communications officer reported to Warlord Krathix. Every frequency, every quantum channel, everything. I've never seen jamming this comprehensive. The second indication came when weapons systems began malfunctioning. Targeting computers provided nonsensical solutions. Point defense systems tracked phantom targets. Main batteries fired at random or refused to fire at all. "It's the same cyber attack they used at New Harmony," someone shouted. But it wasn't. The cyber warfare at New Harmony had been surgical, precise, carefully calibrated to disable specific systems at specific times. This was something else entirely. This was comprehensive. Electronic warfare on a scale that turned the Coalition's sophisticated warships into expensive debris. The human fleet attacked while the Coalition was still trying to understand what was happening. But they weren't alone. From positions all over the solar system, automated defense platforms opened fire. There were thousands of them, hidden on asteroids buried in the rings of Saturn orbiting in the asteroid belt. Each one was equipped with weapons that made the platforms at New Harmony look like children's toys. The platforms didn't use conventional kinetic weapons or even the nanite swarms from the previous battle. Instead, they fired something that Coalition sensors had never seen before. Directed energy weapons that operated on principles that seemed to violate known physics. Beams of what could only be described as controlled spatial distortions reached out across millions of kilometers and touched Coalition ships. When the beams made contact, the ships simply stopped existing. Not destroyed in explosions, not torn apart by force. They just ceased to be. Matter converted directly to energy in a process that left nothing behind but rapidly expanding clouds of radiation. "Retreat," Zethral ordered, his colors pulsing with panic. "All ships, emergency retreat." But retreat was not possible. The Coalition fleet discovered that the humans had deployed some kind of faster-than-light inhibitor throughout the solar system. Ships that tried to engage their FTL drives found the systems refusing to activate. They were trapped in normal space with an enemy that could delete them from existence, with weapons that shouldn't be possible. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted 43 minutes. 3,000 Coalition ships were reduced to fewer than 600. The human fleet barely fired a shot. They simply watched while Earth's automated defenses systematically eliminated any ship that maintained hostile intent. Ships that powered down their weapons and broadcast surrender were spared. Ships that continued to show aggression were destroyed. The humans were offering mercy to anyone who would take it, but they showed no hesitation in annihilating those who refused. High Commander Zethral sat in his command chair, watching his fleet die around him. Every assumption, every calculation, every strategic assessment had been wrong. Not just slightly wrong, catastrophically wrong. "Broadcast our surrender," he said quietly. "All ships cease hostilities immediately." The firing stopped. The human defense platforms went dormant, though Coalition sensors could detect that they remained ready to resume the attack at a moment's notice. The human fleet maintained their positions, surrounding the battered remnants of the Coalition armada. Admiral Chen's voice came through on the command channel. "High Commander Zethral, you and your fleet are now prisoners of the United Earth government. You will be treated according to the Galactic Conventions. Your wounded will receive medical care. Your dead will be honored, and you will be returned to your governments within 1 week." "How?" Zethral asked, not even sure what he was asking. How had humanity built such weapons? How had they hidden such devastating capabilities? How had every intelligence assessment been so wrong? "You want to know how we did this?" Chen asked. "The same way we've done everything since we joined the galactic community. We studied. We learned. We prepared. And we made sure that if anyone ever tried to threaten Earth, if anyone ever tried to use force to dictate terms to us, they would regret it so completely that no one would ever try it again." "The weapons you used," Zethral said, "they're beyond anything in our technology base, beyond anything we thought was possible." "They're beyond what you thought was ethical," Chen corrected. "Your species banned research into certain technologies because you found them too dangerous, too destabilizing. We didn't have that luxury. We developed every weapon we could imagine. Then we developed counters to those weapons. Then we developed counters to the counters. We built a military that could win against any possible enemy because we learned on Earth that the only way to guarantee peace is to be absolutely certain that war would be too costly for anyone to contemplate. The human fleet began the process of securing the Coalition vessels. Medical ships moved among the wreckage, pulling survivors from damaged hulks. The humans were meticulous about collecting the dead, storing bodies in stasis for return to their families. They treated their defeated enemies with a respect that seemed incongruous with the absolute devastation they had inflicted. On Earth, In the command center, General Morrison turned to Admiral Chen. "They'll be terrified now," she said. "Every species in the galaxy will see what we just did. They'll think we're monsters." "Maybe," Chen agreed. "Or maybe they'll finally understand that we're serious about not being victims. That we meant it when we said we'd defend ourselves with everything we have. And if they decide that we're too dangerous to exist, that they need to unite the entire galaxy against us?" Chen pulled up a display showing human forces throughout the galaxy, not just the ships that had been revealed, but the full extent of humanity's military infrastructure, shipyards hidden in deep space, weapons platforms stationed in every human system, fleets positioned to respond to threats anywhere in known space, and technology, constantly advancing technology that pushed the boundaries of what other species thought was possible. "Then they'll lose," Chen said simply. "We didn't want this. We didn't want to be the galaxy's monster. But if that's the role we have to play to keep our people safe, then that's what we'll do. The galaxy will learn to leave us alone one way or another." The survivors of the coalition fleet were processed, documented, and prepared for return to their governments. Every ship was allowed to depart with complete recordings of the battle. The humans wanted the galaxy to see exactly what happened when someone tried to threaten Earth with force. Warlord Krathix, standing on the bridge of his damaged flagship, watched Earth growing smaller on his view screen as his ship departed. The beautiful blue world looked peaceful, almost fragile. It was hard to believe that such a small planet had produced a species capable of defeating the combined might of 3 ancient civilizations. "We awoke a sleeping predator," he said to his first officer. "The Draken hegemony thought we could teach the humans a lesson about strength. Instead, we learned that true strength doesn't announce itself. It waits, hidden and patient, until the moment it's needed. Then it strikes with such overwhelming force that the battle is over before it truly begins." "What will we do now?" the first officer asked. Krathix was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "We will go home. We will rebuild. And we will pray that the humans mean what they say about wanting peace. Because if they ever decide they want conquest instead, there is no force in this galaxy that could stop them." The coalition fleet limped back to their respective territories, carrying with them the news that would reshape the galaxy. 3,000 ships had gone to show humanity their place in the cosmic order. 600 returned, beaten so thoroughly that many would never fight again. The galaxy had tested humanity's resolve. The test had failed catastrophically. Now everyone would have to decide what kind of relationship they wanted with a species that could defend their homeworld against impossible odds and still show mercy to defeated enemies. The balance of power had shifted. The old order built on age and tradition had been challenged by a newcomer with weapons and tactics that changed everything. And the terrifying part, the part that kept galactic strategists awake at night, was the knowledge that humanity had still been holding back. Everything they had shown at Earth, all the devastating weapons and comprehensive defenses, was just what they were willing to reveal. What else were they hiding? What other capabilities had they developed in secret? No one knew. And that uncertainty, more than any weapon, was what would reshape the galaxy in the days to come. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Earth. The Galactic Council chambers looked much the same as they always had, with platforms arranged in careful hierarchy and holographic stars mapping the known galaxy overhead. But everything that mattered had changed. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood on a platform that now occupied the second highest tier in the chamber, just below the ancient Vryloth Concordat. The adjustment had been made quietly, without formal announcement, but everyone understood the symbolism. Humanity could no longer be placed at the bottom. They had earned their position through the oldest and most brutal method known to civilization. Victory in war, the emergency session, had been called to address what every species now referred to simply as the human question. What should the galaxy do about a species that had demonstrated the ability to defeat any combination of opponents? How should the Galactic Council function when one member could, if they chose, destroy all the others? The chamber was fuller than Chen had ever seen it. Every species, even the most remote and isolationist, had sent representatives. This session would determine the future of galactic civilization, and no one wanted to be excluded from those decisions. Council Speaker Thalnax, his crystalline form now showing stress fractures that hadn't been there a year ago, called the session to order. "We gather today," he began, his voice resonating through the translation matrices, "to determine the structure of our shared future. The events of recent months have proven that our old assumptions about power, wisdom, and governance were flawed. We must build something new, or risk descending into a chaos where only the strong survive. Ambassador Vreelanth rose from his platform. The ancient Vryloth looked tired, but there was a clarity in his 6 eyes that suggested he had finally understood something that had eluded him before. For 10,000 years, Vreelanth said, the Galactic Council operated on a simple principle. The oldest species, those who had achieved stability and wisdom through long experience, would guide the younger races. We believed that age equaled wisdom, that time bred caution and compassion. We were wrong. He gestured toward Chen. Humanity has taught us that wisdom does not come from age alone. It comes from experience, yes, but also from necessity. They learned in decades what took us millennia to understand. That true peace cannot exist where the strong prey on the weak without consequence. That civilization requires not just laws, but the ability to enforce those laws against any violator, no matter how powerful. Chen listened carefully. Vreelanth had opposed the Coalition's attack on Earth, but he had been overruled. Now he was one of the few voices advocating for accepting humanity's proposal for restructuring the Council. The humans demonstrated something we had forgotten. Vreelanth continued. They showed restraint when they could have chosen vengeance. They could have pursued the Coalition fleets back to our homeworlds. They could have imposed harsh terms on defeated enemies. Instead, they treated prisoners with dignity, returned the dead with honor, and asked only that we finally listen to what they had been trying to tell us from the beginning. A murmur ran through the chamber. Many species still feared humanity, still saw them as dangerous. But Vreelanth's words carried weight. He was the eldest representative, a being who had witnessed empires rise and fall. If he advocated for accepting the human proposal, others would listen. High Commander Zethral of the Zethkar Collective rose next. His crystalline structure showed the permanent damage he had sustained during the Battle of Earth, fractures that no amount of healing could fully repair. They were physical reminders of his defeat, marks of shame that he would carry for the rest of his existence. The Zethkar Collective acknowledges its error in judgment, Zethral said, each word clearly causing him pain. We calculated that humanity could be contained through superior numbers and adapted tactics. Our calculations were incomplete. We failed to account for the human capacity for innovation under pressure, their willingness to develop technologies we had deemed too dangerous, and their strategic patience. He turned to face Chen directly. We attacked your homeworld with 3,000 ships, confident in our righteousness and our strength. You defeated us with such comprehensive totality that we cannot dispute your right to reshape the galactic order. The Zethkar Collective will support the human proposal for council restructuring. It was a stunning admission. The Zethkar were known for their logical precision and their pride. For their military commander to publicly acknowledge defeat and accept human leadership was unprecedented. Warlord Krathix of the Draken Hegemony stood next. The massive warrior looked smaller somehow, his scales less vibrant than they had been before the wars with humanity. The Draken had lost more ships than any other species, first at New Harmony, then at Earth. Their military tradition, their pride in 4,000 years of unbroken martial glory, had been shattered twice by a species that had been in space for less than a century. The Draken Hegemony respects strength, Krathix said, his voice carrying the ritual cadence of formal admission. For 4 millennia we have been the sword of the galaxy, the warriors who enforced order through superior force. We believed that experience in battle made us invincible. We were wrong. He performed a gesture that other species recognized as the Dracon acknowledgement of a superior warrior. Humanity fights with a creativity and ruthlessness that we have never encountered. They do not fight for glory or honor. They fight to win by any means necessary. This makes them dangerous opponents, but if they can be trusted, invaluable allies. The hegemony proposes a defense treaty with humanity. We offer our warrior tradition in service of the new order they wish to build, in exchange for their protection and their tactical knowledge. Chen felt a weight settle on her shoulders. This was what they had wanted, wasn't it? Recognition, respect, a voice in galactic affairs. But it came with a price. Humanity was being asked to become the galaxy's protector, to be the force that enforced the new order they had proposed. Before she could respond, a smaller species rose to speak. Ambassador Kira of the Playan Commonwealth, a civilization of barely 300 years that had struggled under the dominance of older powers, stepped forward. The younger species of the galaxy wish to be heard, Kira said, her voice surprisingly strong for such a small being. "For too long we have existed at the mercy of the ancient powers. The Vryloth, the Zethkar, the Draken, they decided what was best for the galaxy, and the rest of us had no choice but to accept their decisions." She looked up at Chen with something that might have been hope. "Humanity has offered us something different, a system where all species have equal voice, where disputes are resolved through binding arbitration rather than might making right. They have demonstrated that they can defeat any combination of forces, yet they choose to build rather than conquer. The younger species support the human proposal. We believe it represents our best chance for true equality in the galaxy." More voices joined in. Species that Chen barely knew existed, civilizations that occupied the lowest tiers of the council chamber, all speaking in support of humanity's vision for a new galactic order. They had been silent for so long, accepting their subordinate status as the natural way of things. Now they saw an opportunity for change and they were taking it. Chen let them speak. She listened to stories of exploitation and dismissal, of treaties that favored the powerful and laws that were enforced only against the weak. She heard the frustration of civilizations that had been told to wait their turn, to be patient, to accept that the old and powerful knew what was best. When the speeches finally ended, Chen rose to address the council. She had prepared remarks, careful diplomatic language crafted by Earth's best political minds. But standing there, looking at the assembled representatives of 47 civilizations, she decided to speak from the heart instead. "When humanity first came to the stars," Chen began, "we were filled with wonder. We had spent 10,000 years fighting each other on one small planet. And suddenly we discovered a galaxy full of life and intelligence. We thought we had finally escaped the cycle of violence and conflict. We thought we would find wisdom and peace among the stars." She paused, letting her disappointment show. "Instead, we found the same patterns we had left behind on Earth. The strong dominating the weak, might making right. Civilizations that spoke of wisdom and experience while using their power to exploit those less fortunate. We found a galaxy that was older than ours, but not necessarily wiser." Vrylnth shifted uncomfortably on his platform, but he didn't interrupt. "We could have revealed our true capabilities immediately," Chen continued. "We could have announced that we were a dangerous predator species, showed you our weapons, and demanded a seat at the table through intimidation. But we didn't. We tried to do things the right way. We tried diplomacy, patience, and cooperation. We hoped that if we demonstrated our peaceful intentions, the galaxy would accept us as equals." Her voice hardened. "You laughed at us. You dismissed our concerns. And when we came asking for help protecting our colonists, you told us to learn our place. So we stopped pretending to be what you wanted us to be. And we showed you what we actually are. Not because we wanted to, but because you gave us no choice." She pulled up holographic displays showing the battles at New Harmony and Earth. Every species in the chamber had seen these recordings dozens of times, analyzing them for tactical insights and technological capabilities. But now Chen added something new. Footage from human colonies showing children playing in streets that might have been battlegrounds if humanity hadn't been strong enough to defend them. "This is what we were fighting for," Chen said. "Not territory or resources or dominance. We were fighting for the right of our children to grow up in safety, for the right of our species to exist without constantly looking over our shoulder, wondering when the next powerful neighbor would decide our worlds were convenient for their purposes." She turned to address Vrylnth specifically. "You said that age brings wisdom. Maybe that's true, but sometimes the old become so comfortable with their power that they forget what it's like to be vulnerable. They forget that laws without enforcement are just words and that justice without power is just a dream." Chen pulled up her proposal again, the same one she had presented a year ago, but now she had added something, a detailed framework for implementation. The human proposal is simple: equal representation for all species, binding arbitration for disputes with enforcement mechanisms that can compel even the most powerful civilizations to comply, a mutual defense pact where an attack on any member is treated as an attack on all, and transparency in military capabilities so that no species can hide their true strength the way we did. She looked around the chamber. "But here's the difficult part, the part that many of you are afraid to say out loud. This system requires a guarantor. Someone has to be strong enough to enforce the rules against any violator. Someone has to be willing to stand between the strong and the weak and say no further." "And you're volunteering humanity for that role?" asked a representative from a species Chen didn't recognize. "Not volunteering. Chen corrected. Accepting the responsibility that comes with power. We demonstrated that we can defeat any combination of opponents. That makes us either the galaxy's greatest threat or its most reliable protector. We prefer to be the latter, but the choice isn't entirely ours to make. Warlord Krathik spoke again. The Dracon understand this burden. We carried it for millennia until we became corrupted by it. We began using our strength not to protect but to take, not to serve but to dominate. What guarantee can you offer that humanity won't follow the same path? Chen had expected this question. It was the fear at the heart of every discussion about the new order. How could the galaxy trust humanity not to abuse its power? I can't guarantee that, Chen admitted. No one can promise how their civilization will evolve over centuries or millennia. But I can tell you what humanity learned on Earth. The lesson that we bought with 10,000 years of blood and suffering. Power without accountability leads to tyranny, and tyranny eventually leads to revolution. She pulled up images of Earth's history, showing the rise and fall of empires, the cycle of domination and rebellion that had defined human civilization for so long. Every time a group of humans gained absolute power, they eventually fell. Every empire that tried to rule through force alone collapsed. We learned that the only sustainable form of governance is one where power is balanced by responsibility, where the strong are held accountable for how they use their strength. Chen changed the display to show the structure of Earth's government. This is how we organize ourselves now. Multiple branches of government that check each other's power. Regular elections where leaders must answer to those they govern. Constitutional protections that even the most powerful cannot violate. And when our government fails to live up to these principles, our citizens have the right and the means to change it. She turned back to face the council. We're proposing the same thing for the galaxy. A system where humanity's military power is balanced by collective governance. Where we enforce the rules but you decide what those rules are. Where our strength protects the weak, but the weak have a voice in determining how that strength is used. Vrillanth leaned forward on his platform. You're asking us to trust you with our security while giving us control over your purpose. That's an unusual bargain. It's the only bargain that works long-term, Chen replied. If we tried to impose our will on the galaxy, you'd eventually unite against us. And even though we're strong, we're not invincible. If every species in the galaxy decided we were too dangerous to exist, you could probably find a way to destroy us. It would cost you terribly, but you could do it. She smiled, but there was no humor in it. We'd rather build something that lasts. Something where our children and yours grow up in a galaxy where disputes are resolved through dialogue, where the weak are protected, and where strength serves a purpose beyond conquest. That's worth more than any empire. The council chamber fell silent as representatives absorbed what Chen was offering. It was an unprecedented proposal. The most powerful military force in the galaxy agreeing to serve the collective will rather than its own interests. Many were skeptical. Others were calculating how this arrangement could benefit their own civilizations. But a growing number were beginning to see the possibility of something genuinely new. Ambassador Kira of the Playan Commonwealth spoke again. The younger species have discussed this among ourselves. We have questions about implementation, about safeguards, about how to ensure that this system serves everyone rather than just the powerful. But we believe this is our best opportunity for real change. We support moving forward with the human proposal. One by one, other voices joined in. Not all of them, and not without reservations. But a majority began to form. Species that had been ignored for too long seeing a chance to matter. Older civilizations recognizing that the alternative to accepting humanity's proposal might be worse. The Zethkar Collective formally endorsed the plan, offering their computational abilities to help design the implementation framework. The Draken hegemony pledged their military traditions and tactical experience to complement humanity's forces. Even the Vrilloth Concordat, after Vrillanth consulted with his government, agreed to support the restructuring. There will be details to negotiate, Vrillanth said. Questions about authority and oversight that will take time to resolve. But the Vrilloth Concordat acknowledges that the old order has failed. We are willing to help build something new, even if it means surrendering some of the privileges we have enjoyed for millennia. Chen felt a mixture of relief and trepidation. This was what they had fought for, what they had revealed their true capabilities to achieve. But now came the hard part, actually building a system that could work, that could balance competing interests while maintaining stability. "Then let's begin," she said. The negotiation process took 6 months. Teams of diplomats, legal experts, and military strategists from dozens of species worked to translate the broad principles of humanity's proposal into specific structures and procedures. There were arguments, compromises, and moments when the entire process seemed ready to collapse. But throughout it all, humanity maintained its position. They would provide the enforcement capacity, but the rules would be decided collectively. They demonstrated this commitment by accepting restrictions on their own behavior, agreeing to transparency measures that would allow other species to monitor human military activities. The new Galactic Charter was finally adopted in a ceremony that representatives from all 47 species attended. The old council chambers were reconfigured, platforms rearranged so that every species occupied the same level. At the center, a new platform was created for the Enforcement Council, where human military representatives would work with officers from other species to maintain galactic security. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood with her brother, Admiral James Chen, as the charter was formally signed. Around them, representatives who had once mocked humanity as children playing at civilization now acknowledged them as equals, or perhaps slightly more than equals. "We did it," Sarah said quietly. "We changed the galaxy." "We survived," James corrected. "That's what we do best. Everything else is just details." They watched as the ceremony concluded, as species that had been enemies weeks before began the awkward process of learning to cooperate. It would be difficult. There would be setbacks and challenges. Some species would test the new system, probing for weaknesses, but humanity had learned patience along with power. They had learned that real change took time, that building something lasting required more than just force. In the months that followed, the new system began to function. When a dispute arose between two species over mining rights in a contested system, the Galactic Arbitration Court made a binding ruling, and human enforcement vessels ensured both parties complied. When a warlord from a minor species tried to seize territory from his neighbors, a combined force of human and Dracon ships stopped him within days. Slowly, gradually, the galaxy began to understand that the rules applied to everyone, that strength could be used to protect rather than to prey, that the young species wasn't going to become the new tyrant, but rather the uncomfortable conscience that forced everyone to live up to their stated ideals. Ambassador Vrylanth visited Earth a year after the new charter took effect. Sarah Chen gave him a tour of the planet, showing him the museums where humanity preserved the memory of their violent past, the monuments to those who had died in conflicts that seemed incomprehensible to modern humans. "You carry your history like a burden," Vrylanth observed as they stood before a memorial to one of Earth's final wars. "Because it is a burden," Chen replied. "We never want to forget what we're capable of. The moment we forget, the moment we start to think we're better than our ancestors, that's when we risk becoming them again." Vrylanth was quiet for a long time, studying the names carved into the memorial. "I was wrong about your species," he finally said. "I thought youth made you naive, inexperienced, unsuited for galactic leadership. But now I understand that your youth is your strength. You remember what it's like to struggle, to fight for survival, to be underestimated and dismissed. You haven't forgotten the lessons that we older species let slip away in our comfort and confidence." "We won't forget," Chen promised. "Not for a very long time." They stood together in the fading light, representatives of two species separated by thousands of years of history, but united now in building something new. In the Galactic Council chambers, where platforms now sat at equal heights and every voice carried the same weight, the business of civilization continued. Disputes were resolved through dialogue and arbitration. The weak were protected from the strong, and in the background, quiet and watchful, humanity's fleets patrolled the spaceways, ready to enforce the rules that the galaxy had collectively agreed to follow. The galaxy had paused when humanity revealed its might. It had shuddered at what they could do, at the weapons and tactics they had developed while pretending to be harmless. But in the end, what made the galaxy weep was not fear but relief. Relief that humanity had chosen to be protectors rather than conquerors. Relief that power could be tempered by wisdom, that strength could serve justice rather than ambition. Humanity had learned its lessons in fire and blood on a small blue world. They had learned about war and its terrible costs. They had learned that victory without honor was hollow, that conquest without purpose was empty, that power without responsibility led only to destruction. And now they were teaching those lessons to the galaxy, not through force but through example, not by demanding that others follow their path but by demonstrating that there was another way to be strong, that the truly powerful didn't need to dominate. They could choose instead to protect, to serve, to build something greater than themselves. The moment humanity unveiled its true might, the galaxy had indeed paused, then shuddered. But in the years that followed, as the new order took root and began to flourish, the galaxy learned something unexpected. Sometimes the most terrifying power is the power that chooses not to terrify. Sometimes the strongest warrior is the one who fights only when necessary and shows mercy when possible. And sometimes the youngest species, the one everyone dismissed as children playing at civilization, turns out to be the teacher the galaxy desperately needed but never knew to ask for. Humanity had come to the stars hoping to find something better. They hadn't found it, so they built it instead, with patience and power, with mercy and might, with the hard-won wisdom of a species that had survived its own worst impulses and emerged determined to be better. And the galaxy, watching them, began to understand that perhaps wisdom didn't require age after all. Perhaps it required only the courage to learn from mistakes, the strength to do what was necessary, and the compassion to show mercy when vengeance would have been easier. In the end, that was humanity's greatest weapon, not their ships or their technology or their tactical brilliance. It was their refusal to become the monsters they could have been, their choice to be protectors rather than predators, their determination to build a galaxy where their children and everyone else's children could grow up in peace. That choice, more than any battle, was what changed everything.